My wife Mandy drives just over 8,000 miles a year, mostly for short business trips to visit clients. Our detached villa in Surrey is near the M25 motorway that circles London. It's a nice place to live, but even short drives on the M25 can take a long time. Mandy deals with the traffic by having snacks and soft drinks while listening to bubblegum radio. It helps that she loves her bright orange Volkswagen Beetle convertible. This is a completely new Volkswagen with a powerful 2.0-liter engine, a modern audio system, a black soft top, and black leather seats. Most people think it's a great little car, but that hasn't stopped her from cluttering it with candy bar wrappers, empty drink containers, and other odds and ends. I find it funny that she drives a car designed to go over 100 miles per hour, but spends most of her time either standing still or crawling along some of the UK's most congested roads. Mandy's first car in university was an old Volkswagen Beetle, and she told me she had fond memories of that car. This was before she met me, and she lived at home with her parents. I didn't ask her, but she probably has pleasant memories associated with lovemaking in the cramped space of a Beetle. When Volkswagen reinvented the Beetle a few years ago, she kept talking about how much she wanted one. I took the hint and bought the top-of-the-range convertible she wanted for her 50th birthday. I also bought a personal registration number for her. It was a ridiculous amount of money for a license plate with her initials and the letters BUG on it. The car became known as the Baby Bug. Despite her love for the car, Mandy didn't check the tire pressure and fluid levels in the Baby Bug, so I did it regularly. Some people don't mind driving around in a messy car, but I can't stand a dirty car. So I also cleaned out empty cardboard boxes, paper cups, food wrappers, and other trash. There was nothing special about it, and I never mentioned it. Mandy never thanked me, probably because she didn't even notice. But I didn't mind because I always found enough change in the trash to buy a couple of beers at our local pub. In the end, it's not surprising that Mandy was a little careless with her change since we both make good money and live comfortably. Mandy is a business consultant who helps various companies develop strategies for growth. I am a freelance project manager specializing in change management projects. Everyone calls me Terry. My real name is Dave, not Terrence, but even my wife calls me Terry. Why? She once asked. It's short for Terminator, I replied. Change projects almost always result in some people quitting, and it's my job to do the dirty work. Mandy and I met at university while studying business administration. We got along so well that before getting married, we set up our own limited company, Alpha Business Consultants Limited. Although young and relatively naive, we received useful advice and financial support from my father, a respected commercial lawyer. Unfortunately, my father passed away a few years ago. When we started the company, he agreed to become a director, giving us the credibility we needed to negotiate with potential clients. In return, we gave him some shares of the company, and he always shared his skills, knowledge, and experience with us. In the beginning, Mandy and I worked hard to build our consulting business for strategic business planning. However, we soon realized our skills were different. Mandy excels at future planning, while I am better at solving immediate problems. Mandy focuses on what should happen, and I handle issues when plans go awry. Mandy and my dad believed ABC should concentrate on strategy over implementation, so I became an independent consultant specializing in organizational change projects, while Mandy remained at ABC as its sole employee. Our twin daughters, Linda and Lucy, left for university a few years ago. When they were young, I set up a ground floor room in our house as an ABC office with a sign on the door, Office. Mandy or I could work there without interruptions, though it eventually became Mandy's office since I mostly worked on site with clients. She managed around 50 key clients and charged consulting fees as needed. Unlike Mandy, I rarely had full-time business but received referrals and often worked as an assistant for a large management consultancy. Typically, I had one client at a time, working on major projects like office relocations or restructuring for weeks or months. After each project, I took breaks to read, improve my cooking, and handle house maintenance. While the uncertainty of my next project could be daunting, I enjoyed the flexibility. I also regularly cleaned the fish tank in Mandy's office. She read that a large aquarium with colorful tropical fish aids thinking, so she got one but didn't want to maintain it. She likely thought pH was just two random letters, so I took care of the fish. I never complained about being alone when Mandy was away on business trips, and she didn't mind when I traveled for work. Our personal lives even benefited from these absences, especially after our daughters left. I hoped as empty nesters, we could go out more and maybe take romantic trips to Paris or Rome. People plan, but the gods laugh, as the saying goes. Everything changed when Mandy brought home little Doug, a Shih Tzu. This reminded me of the joke about a zoo with just one animal, a Shih Tzu. I was annoyed she got a dog without consulting me. Though friendly, I knew I'd eventually have to walk and look after him, especially when Mandy was away. As a puppy, he needed house training, and I ended up doing it. We called him Little Doug because he was small, and for a while, he went everywhere with us. Mandy adored Little Doug. He sat on her lap, lay next to her on the sofa, and even sat at the dinner table. In the morning, he was always on our bed. Despite my efforts to keep him out of certain areas, Mandy didn't listen. To keep our love life intact, I had to lock the bedroom door when I wanted to be alone with my wife, but I always remembered to unlock it afterward. Otherwise, Little Doug would howl outside and Mandy would be upset with me inside. This Sunday afternoon was typical until I noticed a credit card receipt from the Ainsley House Hotel near a plastic bag. The hotel, about 20 miles away, is known for its restaurant, spa, and conference center hosting events. The receipt amount suggested lunch or dinner for 2 or 3 people. Assuming Mandy was treating clients, I kept the receipt in my wallet for her. I then cleaned up the snack wrappers, tied up the plastic bag, and threw it away. Afterward, I took the baby bug to the garage for gas and a checkup. The next day, Mandy left on a business trip up north and wouldn't be back for several days. With free time on my hands, I had hoped to take her to lunch at the Fox and Hounds pub, but she was too busy preparing for her trip. Disappointed, as Sunday is our family day, I returned from the garage to find Mandy talking to Lucy in the living room. Listening to their conversation, I realized Lucy was dealing with another personal crisis. While Linda is calm and quiet, Lucy is our drama queen. When their sleepovers with guys got serious, I tried to stay calm while showing them I cared about what was going on in their lives. They know we are both there for them if they need help or advice, but if they want to gossip or cry, their mother is usually first on the list. What I did gather was that Mandy was telling Lucy to forget it, get back to everyday life, that there were lots of fish left in the sea, and to try before you buy. I don't know what happened, so I didn't know what advice to give Lucy. I think the Latin motto, festina lente, is generally a good approach to problem solving. Hurry up slowly, give yourself time to think, and then decide what to do. No matter what happens, Lucy has to decide what to do next. I didn't want to confuse her more, so I just asked Mandy to say hi for me and went into the kitchen to prepare Sunday lunch. Our standard Sunday meal was roast beef and Yorkshire puddings with chips, and I found it therapeutic to put it all together, especially with a decent bottle of claret to go with it. At dinner, Mandy wasn't in the mood for conversation, though she did update me on her calls with Linda and Lucy. Linda is in a stable relationship and doing well in her studies, getting good grades on her recent assignments. Things weren't going as well for Lucy, whose boyfriend dumped her after catching her kissing someone else. I suggested that Lucy's boyfriend might forgive her if given time to change his mind, but I doubted there would be any way back if Lucy started looking for new prospects. Mandy, on the other hand, felt Lucy should just forget about the relationship and find new ways to have fun. After dinner, I took Little Doug for his evening walk, and after ensuring his poop bag was securely sealed, I threw it in the trash can outside. Later, I watched TV in the living room while Mandy went to her office with Little Doug to finish preparing a presentation for her client. I loaded the dishwasher and went to bed, where I tossed and turned before finally falling into a restless sleep. I vaguely noticed Mandy coming to bed much later, but when I woke up, she was already up. Instead of my beloved wife, I found myself face to face with Little Doug and his stinky dog breath. There is nothing like a Shih Tzu's morning breath to get you out of bed in half the time, I muttered as I quickly dressed and took Little Doug out for his morning toilet before joining Mandy in the kitchen. Neither of us likes mornings, and Mandy always needed a couple of espressos to start her day. We chatted briefly about the weather while waiting for the stop-start rush hour traffic on the M25 to end. Then she kissed me on the cheek, petted Little Doug affectionately, got into the baby bug, and went on her way. After she left, I remembered the receipt in my wallet and decided to leave it on her office desk. It was then I noticed the check was cleared at 10:18 a.m., likely payment for an overnight stay. This didn't make sense. Maybe she had a business event and didn't want to come home. I could ask her later, and there would probably be a simple explanation. But with some free time, I checked my diary to see where I was that day. I wasn't home that week, but Mandy was supposed to go north for 3 nights. The check was issued the morning after she left, so she only managed to travel 20 miles before spending the night at Ainsley House Hotel. If it was a business event, I could have easily dropped her off and picked her up, saving the cost of an overnight stay. I sat in her office staring at the receipt, I hadn't noticed any unusual behavior from her. We still made love regularly, but I couldn't help thinking this could be proof of an affair. I was shocked, but mostly puzzled. I had no idea she could be physically engaged with anyone else, and I had no suspects. I also found it hard to understand why she would book a hotel room when she could take advantage of my regular absences and have fun at home. Maybe she did both. Or maybe there was an innocent reason for her stay at the Ainsley House Hotel that evening. As I sat there trying to figure out what might be going on, it dawned on me that she might be doing the same thing on her current assignment. I dialed the phone number on the receipt, hoping my suspicions were unfounded. I asked the nice woman who answered if she could connect me with their guest, Mrs. Amanda Carmichael. She apologized and said she couldn't do it. I was briefly relieved, but instead of saying there was no reservation under that name, she explained that Mrs. Carmichael hadn't checked in yet. Check-in starts at noon and it was only 10:30. "Would you like to leave a message?" she asked. Of course, I could have left a message like, "Your husband called. He wants to know what the hell you're doing there." But that wouldn't have given me the answers I needed. So I politely declined. I made another cup of coffee and considered my next steps. Unlike the idiots running our country, I wasn't going to waste time avoiding the issue or inventing my own version of reality. Going to the hotel and confronting Mandy might not solve our problems, but at least I could take immediate action no matter the consequences. Perhaps there was an innocent explanation. On the other hand, maybe she had a lover and was deceiving me. I decided to confront the situation head on. I put little Doug out in the garden, planning to clean up after him when I got back, then got into the car and headed to Ainsley House Hotel. It was midday when I arrived, and I immediately spotted the baby bug in the parking lot, so Mandy had probably already checked in. I parked 4 rows away and called Mandy on her cell phone. She answered almost immediately. "Hi, Terry. How are you?" "I just heard there was a serious accident on the freeway and wanted to check if you were okay." Traffic is a little difficult, but I didn't know there was an accident. It's on the M25, so you might have passed through before it happened." "Oh, yes. I'm just passing Watford." "Thanks for checking." "Okay, let me know when you arrive safely." "Okay, bye." After hearing this, I decided to walk around the hotel and see if I could surprise her. Maybe she was having lunch with her lover before heading out for the afternoon. If she wasn't visible in public areas, I would call her room and ask to meet. I entered the hotel and headed to the Brasserie restaurant. There weren't many people there, and Mandy wasn't visible. I decided the lobby bar would be a good vantage point. Before calling her room, I would sit for a while to see if she and whoever she was meeting would show up. I still wondered if she might be there for another reason and just hadn't told me. As I crossed the lobby, I noticed a large notice board listing the various function rooms and events happening that day. It looked like Monday was a quiet day. The only event that caught my attention was a private party at the spa and fitness center at 7 p.m. I wondered what kind of private party could be held at a spa. Perhaps these were people who wanted to enjoy the amenities without being burdened with clothes. Maybe my wife had joined a naturist fitness group. I asked the receptionist about the private party. She looked slightly confused by my question and then politely said she couldn't provide any information about it. In other words, it was none of my business. I settled into the lobby bar and ordered coffee. The waiter who served me was more forthcoming when I asked him about the nudists at the spa. "Yes, you could probably call them nudists, but that's not all," he told me. "It's probably one of the worst-kept secrets. This private party is a regular event held by a local club of couples advocating open relationships." "Wow, sounds tempting," I said with false enthusiasm. "Any ideas on how I can find out more?" "If you have internet access, just search for Bottoms Up Club." I took a sip of coffee, took out my phone, and went online using the hotel Wi-Fi. Finding the Bottoms Up Club online was easy. If you wanted to attend any of their events, you had to join the club and accept its terms and conditions. The annual membership fee was only £20. The club's Mellow Monday Mix and Pick evening event, priced at £49 for single men, took place at 7 p.m. at the spa of a local hotel. The website outlined the dress code, noting that masks were optional. By this time, I was sure Mandy had checked into the hotel because of Mellow Monday Mix and Pick. She seemed like she wanted to have fun that evening, so I decided to catch her in the act. I didn't want to see my wife having lovemaking with strangers, but I needed clear evidence for a divorce if that's what she was up to. My plan wouldn't work if she caught me sitting in the lobby, so I finished my coffee and went outside to my car. I called the Bottoms Up Club and spoke with a woman who processed my payment and explained that I needed to bring ID to the event. She assured me that my personal information wouldn't be disclosed to third parties, including other members. You can buy contraceptives and masks at the event, but you can bring your own if you prefer. The club's name won't appear on any transaction records. The vendor will be listed as SJB Services on all purchases. I returned home to check on little Doug and get ready for the meeting with the Bottoms Up Club. I still wasn't sure I was on the right track until I checked our finances online, including ABC bank accounts. Unfortunately, it looked like I was. Over the past year, periodic payments had been made to SJB Services, presumably for Mandy's membership and various events she attended. I printed out bank statements. Returning to the hotel in the evening, I waited until 8 before heading to the spa. An attractive middle-aged lady in a floral dress sat at a large table in the spa's reception area. It turned out she was the same woman I had spoken with on the phone. She checked my ID and sold me a mask and contraceptives. I had no intention of using the contraceptives, but I had to keep up appearances. I guess I looked a little nervous because she tried to calm me down. Just go to the gym. You're a little late, so you may have to wait to join, but I'm sure you'll have a good time. Our members are very social and will make you feel welcome. If you're unsure about anything, please ask and they will help you out. I put on my mask, walked through the door, down the aisle, past the locker rooms, and into the gym. There were about 70 or 80 people in the room, and the organizers tried to create a warm and welcoming atmosphere. The heating was on, and the lights were dimmed, likely to encourage people to shed their clothes and inhibitions. Soft jazz played through the sound system, loud enough to set the mood without making conversation difficult. A table with refreshments was just outside the gym door, but the action was happening inside. I counted 8 large mats covered with white sheets placed throughout the room, with groups of people around each mat. They were fully clothed, partially clothed, or completely undressed, with or without masks. Dressed in a jacket and trousers, I was probably overdressed for the occasion, but I needed to stay that way to get what I needed. The first group I observed included 2 thin young women exploring each other, with the audience muttering approval. The next group featured 2 older couples, their pale, plump flesh rippling and glistening as they tried to grab each other. It struck me as a strange, nightmarish vision of a sumo fight gone wrong. In the third group, I found my wife undressed and sweaty on a rug against the far wall with 2 young Asian guys. She wasn't wearing a mask, but even if she had been, I would have recognized her by the small turtle tattoo above her left ankle. Another 8 or 9 spectators, fully dressed and wearing masks, watched and occasionally commented or encouraged the 3 participants. I had no intention of alerting her to my presence so she wouldn't become aware of me. I focused on secretly recording what was happening with my mobile phone's video camera, which I stuck out from the cuff of my jacket into the palm of my right hand. I had signed a confidentiality agreement to get in, but I wasn't going to let that stop me from getting evidence. Mandy's face would be clearly visible, and I could blur out the faces of third parties later. Standing next to me was a middle-aged man in a black shirt and pants who was happy to provide commentary. I have no idea if this was intended for anyone else, but it seemed like everyone could contribute. It breaks like a house door in a Force 9 storm, he said, stating the obvious to no one in particular. There was a pause, then he added, "Just look how she got into this rhythm." "Yeah, she really likes to handle 2 or 3 men at once," said an undressed woman who appeared to be Mandy's age, hugging an undressed man of the same age. She looked back at the man in black. "We've been with her a couple of times," she added, showing off her knowledge. "I'm sure she'd be glad if you want to join." "Sounds tempting," replied the male commentator. Part of my mind screamed in misery, but I locked it away in a dark corner. The other part of my mind was clear and focused on obtaining evidence, so I knew there was a good chance I had recorded both visual images of Mandy and the commentary. Whatever my state of mind, I had seen enough and wasn't going to stick around. The woman at the spa reception was surprised that I was leaving so soon, but I told her I forgot something and would be back soon. To say I was upset would be an understatement. I tried to come to terms with the fact that Mandy was having fun with a bunch of strange men. Our special relationship was completely devalued and, as a result, worthless. I was in shock, but after leaving the hotel, I began to experience physical and mental reactions to what I had just seen and heard. Nausea and an empty feeling filled my stomach, and bile pooled in my mouth, almost like food poisoning. At the same time, I felt an overwhelming sadness so deep that I had to sit in the car for a while before I could drive home. Slowly, my mind began to build a barrier around the resentment, sadness, and grief. It wasn't any easier for me simply because I knew all about managing change under adverse circumstances. I wasn't going to waste time in denial. She had lovemaking with others after all. I saw it with my own eyes. Of course I was angry, but I accepted the inevitability of change and knew I needed to respond, make adjustments, and control the process as much as possible. Grief and anger would be close companions for some time, but I decided to take action now. I wanted to be proactive, not stuck trying to understand cause and effect. By the time I returned home, I already had an idea of how to take action, control the inevitable changes, and work towards the results I wanted, not those imposed on me. I waited to see if I felt the same in the morning. Festina lente. Meanwhile, I took little Doug out for a short walk so he could do his business, and then tried to dull the pain with a couple of sips of Glenfarclas. I didn't sleep well and felt awful the next morning, but little Doug and I were going on a trip. I've always thought of Cornwall as England's toe, sitting at the far southwest and facing the open Atlantic Ocean. Nowadays, much of Cornwall is practically a retirement haven for wealthy retirees from London who have bought up all the small cottages that once belonged to Cornish fishermen. The hard-working fishermen have been replaced by the silver-haired and wrinkled Mr. and Mrs. Beach. Many of these seniors have pet dogs to keep them company and to encourage daily walks for their health. I considered taking little Doug to Belgium, but he didn't have a microchip or a pet passport, so that wasn't possible. It's probably a good thing he doesn't have a chip implant because he could be tracked. Besides, Cornwall was farther from Surrey than Brussels. The drive to New Quay took over 5 hours, with a short stop along the way to let little Doug stretch his legs and relieve himself. The sweet lady at the animal shelter happily took him from my arms when I told her I had found him wandering the streets of New Quay without a collar or any sign of an owner. She immediately recognized little Doug as a Shih Tzu, and I tried to tell her my joke about the zoo, but she didn't get it. She assured me the dog would easily find a home, even if his owners couldn't be found, since he was exactly the kind of small dog older people look for. I was glad little Doug didn't whine when I left. He just looked a little puzzled. On my way out of New Quay, I decided to find a country pub for a late lunch. When I asked the man behind the cash register at a gas station where I could get lunch, he said, "You can go to the White Horse." I probably looked at him in surprise for several seconds, until I realized he meant the White Horse Hotel nearby. Soon I was sitting alone at a table in a quiet corner of the pub with a ploughman's lunch and half a pint of good ale. I checked my cell phone for text messages and then called Jim Savage. Jim is a senior partner at a large management consultancy based in Surrey. Mandy and I have known Jim for a long time because he is ABC's main competitor. Jim is a fairly likable character, but he's a bit of a wolf in sheep's clothing when it comes to business. Soon after Mandy and I started ABC, Jim tried everything he could to neutralize us. He offered us a well-paying job if we closed ABC and joined him. There's no doubt Jim would have hired us, but would have gotten rid of us later when it was convenient for him. Over the years, we did not accept Jim's offer, but we met with him from time to time at various business events held by the local Chamber of Commerce. Jim was very interested in what I had to say, and, despite the urgency, agreed to meet with me the next day. When I got back to Surrey, it was already early evening, and I decided to call Mandy and tell her about little Doug. I still felt angry, but at least I had taken action to calm that anger. I was sure I could talk to her without revealing what was on my mind. By coincidence, my cell phone rang before I could call her. "Hi, Mandy," I said. "I was just about to call you. I'm afraid I have very bad news. This afternoon, little Doug somehow got out of the garden. He ran onto the main road and was run over by one of those damn multi-axle trucks." "Oh my God!" she cried out in fear. "What happened? Is he okay?" "Sorry, Mandy. I'm afraid he's gone. I didn't see it myself, but a passerby came to me. She said she saw the dog slip under the gate of our garden and run down the street. She couldn't stop him. The truck driver didn't stop. Perhaps he didn't know he run over a small dog. There was nothing I could do. I buried him in the back garden." On the other end of the line, Mandy sobbed for a long time and then muttered something about her poor little dog. Actually, I thought about liquidating the dog, but it seemed too much. Well, you have to draw the line somewhere. I can't blame little Doug for Mandy's decision to have lovemaking with others. If I eliminated him, I would be a cold-blooded dog eliminator. He is not a wild animal like, for example, a wild goat. It also gave me a lot more satisfaction to know that little Doug was alive and well in Cornwall while Mandy thought he was dead and buried. I expressed my condolences to Mandy and offered to buy a small headstone for Doug's grave. This sent her into another fit of tears, and we ended the conversation. She was clearly heartbroken, and there was no doubt she would cry for a long time that evening mourning her loss. My meeting with Jim Savage that same day went very well. After I explained what I needed, he said he was confident his company would agree to the deal on the terms I proposed, and that he would have their corporate lawyer prepare a draft agreement for me to review as soon as possible. On the way home, I stopped at a real estate agency in our area to discuss what our house might be worth on the market. It was a considerable amount. Mandy and I had been discussing our retirement plans, which included keeping the house and renting it out. We talked about it with our daughters, and they thought it was a good idea as long as we didn't sell the house. Now I had to make some changes to my game plan. I didn't call Mandy that night, though she was probably waiting to hear how I was coping with the loss of little Doug. I thought about it, but I wasn't going to be sympathetic. She would handle it herself and return home late the next day. According to her, she was somewhere near Manchester, but who knows if that's true. Whatever she was up to and wherever she was, I slept a little better that night, getting a bit of revenge for the grief she caused me. I woke up early and wondered for a while where little Doug was, until I remembered he was no longer with us. I was relieved that I would no longer have to feed and water him, walk him, and bag his poop. This fleeting thought was immediately replaced by the realization that I had much more serious issues to sort out. In England, divorce lawyers are called family lawyers. They specialize in family law, which mostly deals with divorce and end of life. There are many to choose from, and there isn't much difference between them. I didn't need anyone local, so I called and made an appointment with a family solicitor in Dorking. The name of the town appealed to my twisted sense of humor, and it wasn't far away. I got an appointment for the afternoon with time to spare. I checked the Driver and Vehicle Licensing Authority website for personalized registration plates, then visited a jewelry shop and did some grocery shopping before heading to Dorking. In between, I made phone calls to several business partners. By the time I got to the family law firm's office, my nerves were already a little frayed. I never expected to find myself in this situation. The secretary tried her best to calm me down and brought me a cup of coffee while I waited. The lawyer turned out to be a middle-aged woman who listened carefully to my story but warned me not to rush. For a moment, I wondered if she shared my wife's passion, but then I realized she was probably interested in delaying the process to make more money. In my experience, lawyers are greedy and rarely turn down potential clients regardless of the circumstances. I pointed out to the lawyer that the divorce petition could be withdrawn later. Of course, from my perspective, it was unlikely, and the lawyer probably didn't care. But she seemed satisfied that we had discussed options and agreed to file for divorce on the grounds of Mandy's infidelity. When Mandy returned home that evening, she was deprived of her favorite food. I decided to make an extremely spicy beef curry, one of my favorite recipes, but she couldn't stand it. This was fine with me. Plus, it gave me an excuse to drink some of the excellent Scottish craft beer I love so much. Over dinner, I told her about the new contract I had secured while she was away. I explained that I would be working up north in Yorkshire for a while, and she seemed to think it was just another project like all the others I'd worked on over the years. She was still very sad about little Doug, and disappointed to learn that I was leaving for Yorkshire the next morning and wouldn't return until late Saturday evening. I didn't want to seem completely heartless, so after dinner, I hugged her, and we sat and watched TV. She cried quietly for little Doug, and I quietly breathed the fumes of beer and curry on her. My trip to Yorkshire was very fruitful. The deal had already been concluded over the phone, and the client had all the papers ready to sign. I knew several directors, and they were thrilled that I accepted an initial 6-month assignment with the prospect of moving to a permanent position. In addition to my fee, they agreed to pay moving costs, temporary accommodation in a local hotel for 2 weeks, and half the cost of renting a property in Yorkshire for the remainder of the period. Everything was ready for me to begin work more or less immediately. Now all I could do was consciously distance myself from Mandy. My cell phone rang that evening right after I checked into the hotel. I was looking forward to a pint or two of local Yorkshire ale and didn't want to waste time on the phone with Mandy. She discovered the fish swimming lifelessly in the afternoon and tried her best to gently break the news to me. She was completely unaware that she was talking to the fish eliminator himself. I just didn't feed them anymore. "I'm really sorry I had to give you bad news, especially after you had to hold little Doug," she said. "I have no idea what happened, but there was nothing I could do to save them." "I think you're right, Mandy," I replied. "It's too late to save them. Leave the tank. I'll clean and disinfect it when I return tomorrow." That Saturday, the atmosphere in our house was very subdued. It was only a short stopover for me as I had returned early in the morning and was planning to go back to Yorkshire on Sunday. I had a list of things to do, including sorting through a pile of paperwork. Mandy went shopping and cooked dinner, which took her mind off things, and we spent a quiet evening in front of the TV with a glass or two of wine, watching celebrities on talk shows. Neither of us was in the mood for closeness, probably because we were both too physically and emotionally exhausted. To my surprise, I managed to sleep well for the first time in several days. When I woke up, my body seemed to have eased, and my mind had adjusted to the new reality. Feelings of alienation, uncertainty, and despair receded and were replaced by a grim determination to keep working and make the best of the situation. I still felt sad and empty inside, but I knew I was far from melancholy and had gained control of my emotions by focusing on the short-term results I could achieve. After lunch, I packed the car, kissed my wife goodbye, and drove off to Yorkshire. Mandy must have been shaken to her core when she was served with divorce papers a few days later. She had no warning, and I guess she thought she was just signing for some business papers. Of course, I knew when this would happen and made sure my cell phone was turned off. That day, I'd like to think I wasn't being petty or cruel because I was very busy at work. But I have to admit that I liked the idea of not being on call for those few hours. Returning to my hotel room after work, I turned on the phone again, read the text messages, and listened to the voicemail. The gist of them was that she was upset, confused, and angry. I called her back without hesitation. "What the hell is going on, Terry?" she asked, getting straight to the point. "That's exactly the question I asked myself, Mandy," I replied. "But that was a week or so ago." "I don't understand what you're up to, but I wish you would stop it," she said. "This is already beyond the bounds of a joke." "It's actually like you're reading my script, Mandy." "What do you mean?" she asked. "Well, Mandy, at some point, I wondered what you were up to," I told her. "Unfortunately, it's too late to stop it now, and it's definitely gone beyond the scope of a joke." "What are you talking about, Terry?" "Ainsley House Hotel and Bottoms Up Club." There was a pause, followed by a long sigh. "I'm so sorry, Terry," she said. "I really don't know what to say. I thought you'd never know." "And what you don't know can't hurt you, Mandy. I found out. I know about it, and it hurts. Terry, we need to talk about this, but it's not something we can do over the phone. Will you come home on Friday?" she asked. "I don't think talking will help much," I told her. "I'll arrive on Saturday, Mandy, but I need to be back in Yorkshire by Sunday evening." When I returned on Saturday afternoon, Mandy looked very worried. I didn't unpack my things because I didn't know how events would develop. I planned to stay the night in one of the guest bedrooms, but wanted to be able to go somewhere else if things got difficult. In the face of life-shattering damage to home, family, or friends, Britons tend to put the kettle on and make some tea. Mandy soon sat us down in the living room with a cup of tea, and I waited patiently for her to speak. "First of all, I have to lay my cards on the table and say that this whole mess is my fault, Terry," she said. I said nothing. "The fact is that I gave in to temptation. I found out about the Bottoms Up Club almost by accident, and then I couldn't stop thinking about it. You weren't home when I first went. I was incredibly nervous, to the point of wearing a masquerade mask, because I thought that if I could hide my face, people wouldn't see me. I thought I could just be an observer, watch while other people performed, and put on a show for others." I waited for her to continue. "At first, everything was as I had imagined," she said. "But then, different people began to approach me, and this turned me on. Incredibly, it didn't take long before I allowed myself to be persuaded to take an active part. It was kind of scary, but after doing it the first time, I realized that these people are some of the most sincere, honest, and safe people I've ever met, which is another reason why I kept doing it. I found that I liked it. I like watching other people have lovemaking, and I like being watched during lovemaking. Part of this has to do with the idea that lovemaking with other people can just be fun. It doesn't have to be such a big deal." She looked at me with hope and expectation. "I agree, Mandy," I replied. "Lovemaking with other people can be fun." She smiled at me encouragingly. "As far as I'm concerned," I continued, "if you have no obligations to anyone else, you can do whatever you want as long as it's between consenting adults." I sipped my tea, watching her smile quickly disappear, and waited for her reaction. Mandy acted as I expected. She admitted there was a mistake in her plan, but there was no apology, no regret for the damage caused, and no indication that she would change her behavior. I knew her well enough to know she would be stubborn about this. "What I did with other men from time to time didn't affect my feelings for you, Terry," she said. "I love you very much, and our life together is wonderful. I just hope you can understand that having fun with other men in a safe environment doesn't threaten what you and I have. If you're not interested, you can just ignore it. If you're not there, you won't see anything. I think you're wrong, Mandy, I replied. Anyway, I'm afraid it's too late for me not to see anything. What do you mean? She asked. I know about the payments to the hotel and club. Are you saying you saw me there? I looked into her eyes. If I remember correctly, around 8 p.m. on Monday a couple of weeks ago, you were having fun with 2 young Asians. Some people said you like lovemaking in public. Oh my God, she gasped. I am so sorry. Seeing me there must have been a terrible shock, but please understand it was always just a physical activity. It was nothing but an exciting adventure, that's all it could ever be. Believe me, I don't love anyone else and wouldn't want to. Looking back, I know I should have talked to you, but I wasn't sure I could. Well, you're right about that, Mandy, I said. I wouldn't be happy if you told me what you were up to. Maybe it was more exciting for you because you couldn't tell me. I know you must be feeling hurt and disappointed, and I understand your point of view, Terry. I agree I may have made an error in judgment, but filing for divorce is an extreme reaction, don't you think? I don't think it's an extreme reaction under the circumstances, I replied. You decided to betray me by giving yourself to others. In my understanding, this is unacceptable, which is why I want a divorce. Mandy's shoulders slumped, and she sighed resignedly. Can we at least think a bit about what this will mean for everyone involved before we go down this path? I just think we shouldn't give up on the status quo without considering the consequences. I'm already considering the consequences, I replied. We can take some time to think it over, Mandy, but it's unlikely I'll change my mind. I left Mandy alone with her thoughts and went to the Fox and Hounds pub for a beer. I love pubs, but I never felt completely comfortable at the Fox and Hounds. Despite all the years we lived in the area, I wasn't going to miss it that much. The clientele was largely middle-aged, middle-class, pretentious people, and any day of the week, given the choice, a pint of Yorkshire ale would beat a watery southern beer. As I sipped my stale, warm, and relatively tasteless local beer, I contemplated my next steps. When I got back, Mandy had already started getting ready for dinner, so I went upstairs, carried my bag into the guest bedroom, and grabbed a couple of things I needed from the master bedroom. Our conversation over dinner was mostly about what our daughters were doing. Lucy had apparently taken Mandy's advice and was on a free search looking for a replacement for her ex-boyfriend, who was now dating Lucy's BFF, much to her annoyance. I asked Mandy what a BFF was, and she explained that it stood for best friend forever. It seemed unlikely to me that this girl would have this status for long. I've always considered Mandy my best friend. She knew my attitude towards her was now comparatively cold, but I don't think she realized how much things had changed. Perhaps because I was not rude or impolite. She seemed to be under the impression that our conversation that afternoon had led to some kind of ceasefire agreement. I wasn't going to dissuade her of this. On Sunday morning, I got up early, made myself some toast and coffee, packed my things, jumped in the bug, and headed off to Yorkshire. I thoroughly checked and cleared the car of everything that belonged to Mandy, including several business files that I found lying in the back seat. I had already passed Watford when my mobile phone rang. "Where are you?" Mandy asked. "Did you happen to take the baby beetle to the garage?" "No," I answered. "I picked up the baby beetle and am heading back to Yorkshire." "I don't understand. Are you saying you have already left? Why did you take the baby bug? And why didn't you say goodbye?" "I just decided to take the baby beetle, and you were still sleeping." There was a pause as she processed the information. "I don't understand," she finally said. "What should I do without the baby bug?" "You can use another car, the one I usually drive." "I still don't understand why you took my car, but I know you're not yourself right now, so I'll let it go this time. I'll make do with another car for a few days. Just drive carefully and make sure not to damage the baby bug." By the next day, I proudly owned a small red Mazda MX-5 convertible that I spotted on a dealership lot in Yorkshire. I partially traded in the bug, minus the personalized registration plates. All the paperwork was done, and I posted an ad for the personalized plate on several websites. Mandy was very annoyed when she called me last week and found out I had no plans to return from Yorkshire. "But how can I get my car back?" she asked. "No way," I told her. "I sold it." "What do you mean, sold?" she screamed. "This is my car." "Actually, Mandy, that's not technically true," I replied. "I bought it, and my name is on the registration document." "But it's not fair, Terry." "Maybe so," I replied. "You could argue that I gave it to you, and it's unfair for me to take it back. But it's not much different from what you did to me." "Oh, stop it, Terry," she said. "It's not the same thing at all. You're just being petty. But I understand what you mean. If you stop this nonsense and just return home..." We can discuss everything rationally, settle it, and move on with our lives. Leave it to me, Mandy, I said. I'll come back to you next week. Mandy called me every day, asking me to come back to Surrey to talk and figure things out. The conversation was always the same until the day she found out I had sold my stake in ABC. How could you make such a decision alone? She tormented me. Why didn't you talk to me about this? I am the second shareholder of our company, so you should have asked me before doing such crazy things. Reasonable questions, I answered calmly. I know you are the second shareholder of ABC, and I know my actions will seriously affect you. Believe me, Mandy, I completely understand that you are angry and upset that I made a decision unilaterally without consulting you. I'm quite sure you would not approve of my intentions, but in fact, I did not need to ask you about the sale of my shares in ABC. I know how you feel, because I felt the same way when I learned about your decision to have lovemaking with others. I'm sorry you're upset, but no matter how you feel, the decision cannot be undone. You'll just have to accept what happened and adapt to any changes that result. You're a prick, Terry, she growled. The next time I called, a few days later, she was screaming and yelling at me, choking with rage so much that it was difficult to understand what she was saying. When we started the company, we each had the same number of shares. She didn't realize I had inherited my father's shares, increasing my share to 51%. It came as an unpleasant surprise when ABC's new majority owners froze the company's bank accounts and sent an invitation for an extraordinary general meeting to consider proposals to replace the board of directors and complete the takeover. Mandy angrily told me she now had no access to ABC's cash reserves. Don't you understand, Terry? ABC had over £200,000 in the bank. Because of what you did, we no longer control these funds. I don't know what to do now. We cannot get this money for our pension. Sorry to have bad news, I managed to say when she paused briefly. But at least you still have a job. There was a sharp breath. Oh my God, she gasped, realizing what I said. There was silence, and then I heard the unmistakable sound of mournful sobs before she passed out. I think Mandy eventually realized the deal I made with Jim Savage took ABC's finances and other resources into account. She didn't know that in exchange for 51% of the shares, I received twice the average annual turnover of the last 5 financial years, plus the equivalent of cash reserves. Another part of the deal was that Jim offered to retain Mandy as a general consultant for at least 2 more years at a benchmark annual salary and additional performance-based benefits. Jim wasn't a fool. He knew keeping her as the face of ABC would be beneficial. During the divorce proceedings, our house was sold. Buying and selling houses in England is not easy. Offers are often contingent on other deals being made in a chain where the buyer is counting on someone else to buy their property before they can buy yours. Additionally, the best offers can be outbid at the last minute by someone offering more money after the official closing date. This is exactly what happened with our house. The best offer on the closing date was conditional on other transactions in the chain that would eventually result in us receiving money. However, the day after the closing date, the real estate agent received a slightly better offer without any chain or other encumbrances. I was very pleased when we decided to accept the unconditional offer, and I think Mandy was relieved the deal went through. By this point, she had completely accepted that we were going our separate ways. The deed transferring ownership of the home identified the new owners as Max Payne Associates. I made sure the identity of the person behind Max Payne Associates was not revealed. I decided this was a good investment. The house was in a prime location and could easily be rented out to create an additional source of income for a management consultant living and working in Yorkshire. I haven't spoken to Mandy for quite some time, but she recently called me and asked if I had seen her wedding dress. Our daughter Linda and her boyfriend are about to get married, and it seems Mandy really wanted Linda to wear her wedding dress on her big day. Mandy thought it might have been mistakenly packed with my things when we separated. Sorry, Mandy, I said. I have no idea where your wedding dress might be. I always try to tell the truth. I have no idea where the dress might be now because I took it and sold it to a lovely lady in Yorkshire who owns a nearly new shop. There's no way I would let my wife keep that wedding dress. Besides her breaking her vows, I was determined to prevent my daughters from wearing it if or when I escorted one of them to the altar. Lucy called me a few days later. Mom is furious, Dad, she exclaimed dramatically. She just found out that the diamond ring symbolizing eternal love that you gave her several years ago is cheap jewelry. It costs almost nothing. Oh God, what a pity, I replied. She probably thought it was a very valuable ring and must feel very disappointed and unhappy. I think she would never have known the truth if she had not checked. Sometimes this happens in life. People attach value to things and then feel terribly disappointed if the value turns out to be much less than they thought. Of course, the original ring is safely locked in a safe deposit box in my bank. Who knows? Maybe it will come in handy if I find someone special.